Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about movies, music, art, and culture. And today, we're going to be talking about the new album from Justin Moore, titled Off the Beaten Path. First, let's talk a bit about pandering in art. Now, as somebody who listens to music that is shamelessly commercial and designed to appeal to very specific demographics, I'm very much familiar with certain musical acts attempting to pander or cater to their unique fan base, who will inevitably lap up whatever they put out. Now, I'll admit that part of this is a testament to the feedback relationship between artists and their fans, which is only intensified with the rise of the internet, where pop stars and other musicians can be in direct contact with these fans as they seek approval from them and vice versa. And before you know it, you get die-hard fan bases who completely subsume to their artist's point of view, regardless of common sense or any sane form of criticism. That's one of the things that kind of bothers me about the state of modern fandom. Even if you have the slightest iota of criticism for an act you like, you tend to get ripped apart by some fan bases. Unfortunately, there's a nastier version of this, and it's not just in the pandering towards the fans themselves, but towards their lifestyle and ideology. This is some acts that will make music and art designed to reinforce the fans' personal beliefs and preferences, make them feel justified in their lifestyle choices. And here's where we all have to be brutally honest, including me. We all have favorite acts that fall into this category. Acts that don't really opt to challenge us per se, but produce art that's specifically designed to reward us for simply being fans or just for caring. Hell, the Backstreet Boys made one of the largest hits of their career with Larger Than Life, which is a song that pretty much spelled out that feedback relationship in exact, explicit terms. And look, art designed with the fans in mind isn't always the healthiest. It's the equivalent of musical comfort food. But that doesn't mean that this sort of material has to be harmful, so as long as said fans keep their critical faculties engaged and are aware of the messages behind said artwork. And if they're aware of the fact that they're getting pandered to, it's not going to be affecting them as hard. Now look, that's not always a natural response, but then again, engagement with art isn't always designed to be easy. Now, someone make the argument that art is challenging to engage with is the best kind of art, because those added hurdles to get into that art pushes you even further towards the artists themselves, their headspace, the mindset in which they created it. But too often, that critical faculty gets shut down, and thus you get legions of believers and directioners and juggalos, people who will say and do insane things because the artists have cultivated a fandom that reinforces their decisions, good and bad. And when you start including the sort of pandering towards ideology or lifestyle or political beliefs, elements that have a very real impact on people's lives, you're starting to tread into some questionable territory. And if the artist isn't conscientious of that particular fact, things can get even worse. Or, to put it another way, there's a reason Eminem made songs like Role Model and Who Knew and Sing for the Moment. He knew people empathized with the anger and fear and real emotion because it often mirrored things that fit within their lives. And in songs like Stan, he revealed his very justified fear that his art could be used to justify dangerous lifestyles. Hell, it already has been used to justify those dangerous lifestyles. That's the bad thing. But then you have artists who don't seem to nearly care as much, or who actively seem to want to encourage people to buy into their lifestyles promoted in the music, or whom are too lazy or stupid to consider all the consequences of their art. And with that in mind, we finally come to Justin Moore. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar, Justin Moore is one of the most rancid and terrible country acts working today. If Casey Musgraves represents everything going right with country, Justin Moore represents everything that's toxic and wrong. Not only is his instrumentation completely devoid of texture and flavor, and his voice just makes my skin crawl, but the premise of his material is based explicitly around pandering to a certain country demographic. And it's not just directed at his fans themselves, but at his fans' lifestyles, ideology, and political beliefs. Music that seems clinically designed to reinforce the worst possible impulses of his fan base. Songs like Beta Hook and This Is NRA Country are tracks explicitly aiming to cultivate the same sort of backwards, contemptible, anti-intellectual horse manure that plays to the Fox News watching, Limbaugh listening, Obama hating types, all mixed with a heavy dose of masculine swagger and privilege that should have died decades ago. And, look, I'm not one to attack art for its subject matter. Except in cases where there isn't a shred of authenticity in Justin Moore's delivery or presentation. It's too clean, it's too polished. There isn't a shred of humor or real feeling in here besides smug, stupid obnoxiousness. Let's throw up a comparison with the Zac Brown Band, for instance, an act that has their fair amount of Southern pride as well, and who have been accused of pandering to that particular demographic, and that's something I can acknowledge, but it's clear from the rich texture in their vocals and instrumentation and production and the real emotional heart in which they sell their material that it's at least coming from somewhere real. In contrast, if it wasn't for the accent and the grating over singing, Justin Moore would really come across as a shill. But look, I'm willing, for some ungodly reason, to give this guy another chance. After all, people can change and grow, and given that he didn't write nearly as many songs on this new album, maybe the Nashville country music machine managed to strip away enough of the elements that I found absolutely reprehensible. So, with all that in mind, what do I think of Justin Moore's newest album, Off the Beaten Path? Well, I will say this, I prize honesty. So here it is. This album is terrible. Justin Moore's Off the Beaten Path isn't just one of the worst country albums I've reviewed this year. It might just be one of the worst albums I've reviewed this year at all. Period. Regardless of genre. Not only do all of my previous issues with Justin Moore still somehow hold, but he and his new songwriters managed to create new issues. I am both astounded and appalled this album got cleared for release, because the sheer amount of rancorous, hateful stupidity on display is just mind-boggling. But before I tear in this album to shreds, as I will, let's point out a few of the things that it actually does right, because there are a few elements on this album that aren't completely worthless. Say what you will about Justin Moore's terrible, overwrought, often off-key singing, but he does approach his subject material with a certain amount of energy, and you can definitely buy that he believes what he's selling. And I'll say this, he doesn't exactly make filler either. There's all sorts of negative adjectives that I'm going to use to describe this album, but boring is not one of them. And, I will say this, the guitar work on this album is pretty solid. Yeah, it's the tone on the guitar is flat and lifeless, and the production completely squelches any chances for Justin Moore's instrumentation to develop any force of personality, particularly in comparison with some of his contemporaries like Chris Young. But some of the solos, they're passable, and they're not really worth hating on any level. The frustrating fact, though, is that the production on this album renders the guitar work completely ineffectual. And what's worse is that it doesn't really fit the tone that Justin Moore was attempting to go for in this album. I have many things that I'm going to be saying about Justin Moore's songwriting, but he is clearly trying to write material for small-town, rural Americana audiences. Okay, I can get behind that. So why the hell is his production so pop, with little to no texture anywhere in his instrumentation? He might be trying for down-to-earth country authenticity, but his production completely betrays that intent. It's one of the biggest problems I have with Justin Moore. His production just completely backfires on him and completely does not fit with the kind of music he's looking to make. Now, of course, his vocal delivery doesn't help matters. One of my biggest issues with the guy, besides his painfully scrub clean image that just looks incredibly fake, is that whenever he sings, he never sounds like he's having any fun, or that he's enjoying himself, or in that so many of his songs are just overloaded with this edge of serious sincerity that just doesn't always fit. Look, I'm a fan of sincerity and honest songwriting in country music particularly, but sometimes you need a degree of self-awareness, which I'm starting to think Justin Moore doesn't have. I was having actually a little bit of difficulty tracing back my influence on what might be causing these issues with his delivery, and then I figured out Justin Moore is trying very hard to be Brooks and Dunn, particularly in their later work that was more hard-edged and serious. But here's the funny thing about that. Brooks and Dunn may have taken their work very seriously, but they still wrote fun songs. They wrote Boot, Scoot, and Boogie, and that's a dance song for line dancing. And you know what? They were actually good songwriters. And really, I could go on and on about the songwriting on Off the Beaten Track, so I will. The songwriting on Off the Beaten Path is absurdly bad, to the point where I started wondering many times if this was kind of a joke. Now, considering I've had plenty of recent experience hearing from the Nashville songwriting machine, I was astounded how lowbrow and poorly written the lyrics were on this album from a technical perspective. Mostly songs courtesy of Justin Moore himself. Of course, you're going to get songs about booze on a country music album. That happens. But then you get the song called Beer, which is one of the laziest odes to alcohol I've probably ever heard written. And of course you're gonna get your obnoxious pandering songs about girls, but then you get tracks like I Want It to Be Yours, which rivals Honky Tonk Badonkadonk as one of the most shameless songs written about a woman's ass in music. The lyrics are just minimalist and sloppy, often coming across as really unfinished at points, and maybe unfairly or not, it just makes Justin Moore sound like a blithering idiot on some tracks. Of course, he also tries to come off as a hellraiser a couple times on Off the Beaten Path, and not only is it completely unbelievable, it's also lined with some terrible songs that really raise some distressing questions. On material like Point at You, he brags about being this hellraiser, kind of ass-kicking type to go out and cause havoc and run red lights. And then whenever somebody asks whether or not he has a good side, he just points at his girl. Here's a question from the Peanut Gallery here. Did you just admit to your audience that you have no positive qualities besides being a total douche? Because I can vouch for that. And this leads to the follow-up question. Why the hell is this girl still with him? I asked that question again somehow on That's How I Know You Love Me, which has lyrics like, you never tried to change me, you just tried to save me. Well, clearly it didn't work because you obviously haven't changed, Justin Moore. Not only does it perpetuate the reprehensible girl tries to say bad boy routine, yeah, because that's exactly what we need. It further romanticizes it. That's right, we have a Justin Moore song with the ethics of Twilight. And speaking of reprehensible things on this album, I'd like to single out the song Old Habits, featuring Miranda Lambert. Now, look, this already sounds strikingly similar to, at least in terms of songwriting and lyrics, to Keith Urban's We Were Us, another duet with Miranda Lambert that just so happened to occur on his most recent album, but it also sounds very strikingly familiar to another song. A song that just so happens to be one of my favorite country songs of the past few years, and my favorite hit song of 2011. So, look, I want you all to try this little experiment with me. I've included the links in the comments section, but I've also included some as annotations here. Here is a link to the song Old Habits by Justin Moore, and here's a link to the other song. Now, do you notice any slight similarities, or maybe in the chord production, or vocal delivery, or the fact that one song is a complete fucking ripoff of the other? Now, I'm not going to call Justin Moore a thieving hack because, he didn't write the song. And, dear God, he should have known better. And of course, there's the pandering to Southern pride in the good old days, and it's done with the clumsiness and bold-faced lack of shame that we've all come to expect from Justin Moore by now. And it starts really early on this album with Old Back in the New School, which is an undeniable attack on the presumed decline of moral fiber in today's society, with lines like, you can wear your pants down around your knees, but that don't mean a dang to me. So yeah, let's throw a little casual racism on the pot here. And look, I've got my lengthy digression / rant on how cultural norms and morality have evolved / mutated / devolved in the past couple of years. But look, I have a hard time buying into this brand of self-righteous pandering from a guy who's only 6 years older than me. He's 29. What right does he have coming across to bitching at us about moral values? But what really gets kind of bizarre about the pandering on this album is that as much as Justin Moore does it, he has songs like This Kind of Town, where he attempts to glorify people in trying to spend money at Walmart and that sort of commercialism. He tries to do it with complete sincerity and just comes across more sad than uplifting. The kind of song that would make Alan Jackson, writer of Little Man, spit fire and brimstone. Or there are songs like Field Full of Hillbillies, which operates on the same premise, at least on the intellectual level, of Here Comes Honey Boo Boo, and basically operates as a family coming out to the city, driving out into the country, looking out the window, hey, look at those rednecks. It's almost treating them like a walking freak show. I mean, does Justin Moore have no self-awareness whatsoever? Does he know the direction of how he's painting his target audience? Well, if he did, he probably wouldn't have released the one song on this album that I actually think is somewhat passable, which is One Dirt Road, which is hyper-earnest prayer to God that there should just be one dirt road in heaven to alternate between all those golden lanes so he can recreate his rural paradise on earth. Is it schmaltzy and cheesy as all hell? Oh God, yes. But at the same time, Justin Moore does sell it with some real conviction, and It's earnest enough, and the fact that he did write it means I really can't make fun of it all that much as I'd like to. I'm not going to mock somebody's faith, particularly when you can tell it plays a big role in his life. In fact, you know, Justin Moore, that might be a good fit for you. Go make Christian rock, so that way I will never, ever have to review your music ever again. So yeah. Off the Beaten Path by Justin Moore is junk in the worst kind of way. It's the kind of country music that makes me sick, and it's the rancid, pandering worthlessness that Nashville seems to think that American audiences want to hear. And look, I'm not about to step up here and say that I have faith in American intelligence, because most of the time I don't, and that they want art from their country music, because once again, most of the time they don't. But even still, they deserve better than this. Between the lackluster instrumentation with no swell, the terrible misplaced production, Justin Moore's overwrought singing, and songwriting that honestly 2 Chainz would laugh at, this album deserves its 3. And look, if you like country music, as I do, as you can probably tell that I do if you've seen my previous videos, but furthermore, if you're willing to stand up for it and believe that it is worthy of critical appraisal, and you believe that it's worthy of being considered a legitimate musical art form, you should avoid Off the Beaten Path by Justin Moore like the freaking plague. Then maybe, hopefully, Nashville will get the bloody message. So yeah, a bit of a negative video, but these videos happen sometimes. Thanks a lot for watching and putting through my rant. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. If there's anything that I could do in my production, or particularly in my delivery here, I'd be more than happy to hear it. Or if there's any other albums that you'd like me to check out, I'm also more than willing to take a look at that. Make sure you go through my previous videos to make sure I haven't already talked about the video before you make a suggestion, though. Until then, see you next time.